And when you say listen, it's not necessarily as in someone physically saying, hey, I really like this
No.
one, I'm going to come and buy more. What are you listening to?
Show me your 20
P&Ls?
best-selling dishes.
Right. Okay. So it's data.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that, you know, some people can really miss the boat on that.
Yep.
And it's a shame for a lot of those small places. It's like, and it's not about just putting on fancy booze or fancy food for that matter. I mean, you know, if you've got a burger shop and you got burgers, that's what you're going to do. There's kind of a price point cap on that. Mind you, these days there probably isn't. Right, we're going to talk about a few things today.
You're making me nervous now.
Yeah. No, don't be nervous. Well, maybe you should. I think we're going to start with, we talked about this at some point in time. I can't remember if it was actually on the record or not.
Right.
With regards to value for money.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a broad brushstroke. And I think when we spoke about it last, we were talking about the fact that, you know, everyone's perception of value is different.
Mm-hmm.
And you can get perception of value at every price point, regardless of what it is. And I know that, you know, these days, I mean, God, you walk into any kind of grocery store and everyone kind of shits themselves these days because it's like, yeah, that makes sense. I'm paying $9 for a packet of chips. Is the value for money there on that packet of chips? Am I going to get the joy for $9? No, I'll wait for it to go on half price next week. But when it comes to value for money, how important do you think that is for your businesses specifically, and then in the general market?
The number one.
That's it?
Only because we you know, the restaurant game is so fickle and everybody is willing to drop you like that for the next hot item that comes along. But if you can provide really, really tasty food and fantastic value, you've got most of the market licked straight away. But I want to reiterate, like I said last time we spoke about value, value doesn't mean cheap.
Yeah.
Because I don't think the market necessarily is always out there chasing the cheapest steak or the cheapest curry or the cheapest dumplings. Value for money is made up, this is just my opinion, is made up by a raft of little things.
Like what?
Like time. Like people find that if you can go and get a cheap eat or a quick meal, I think McDonald's, for example, has that speed. All those big superpowers.
Those high volume.
KFC.
Yeah.
They sell time as well, and I believe Rice Boy does as well. It's a time thing.
Yeah.
And the cost is included in that too. It's not super expensive. But the one that we have a motive that a motto that we live and die by, and that is sell it for what you have to, not what you can.
Yeah, and we've spoken about that before. I think it's a really critical thing.
Yeah, but you just got to have a bit of a think about it. And before we open any of our restaurants, we just workshop around a whiteboard of what the values of the restaurant are and what's going to make us. But what do we want to be famous for? And that all gets encompassed into what value for money looks like.
When does that conversation start? Does it start for you before you've even decided to open the venue, or before you've signed the lease, or anything else?
Because we come up with a concept that we want.
Yep.
So Market Bistro, for example, we knew that we wanted to create a bistro.
Yep.
And you were involved in that conversation. We basically had a chef, we had yourself, we had Luke, and we thought we had a site. So then we start conceptualizing that. Then we find the site, we get the deal done with the site. But all that stuff in and around the construction of the wine list and construction of the menu, and obviously the bottle shop, that's value for money is top of the food chain as far as all those conversation goes, I think.
Where do you think people go wrong when it comes to value for money? Because you know, we've all been to restaurants, and I have one vivid memory in my mind of being in Sydney a long time ago at a very, very good restaurant. It's no longer the same operators. So, but at the end of the meal, and I spent a lot of money, ate well, drank well, and at the end of the meal, there was nothing on the table except for 2 water glasses and my credit card, which I put on the table, and it was on there for nearly 20 minutes.
Yeah.
All I wanted to do was leave.
Yeah, so that's a proper problem.
So all of a sudden, that went from a really great night, food was great, service was great, booze was really good, to I'm never going back to this place, because even though like the spend was probably $300 or $400 a head,
Yeah.
which is ridiculous, excessive, and yet I walked away. If it had been 15 minutes earlier or 10 minutes earlier, even, I probably would have gone, that was a great night. But I went home seething, just
Isn't it
absolutely
funny?
fuming.
The human race and people's traits, I find it fascinating. Like, because that's really that's tough. Like, that's a tough market. But I've always said that it's really difficult. The more pointy end of the market you're aiming for, the less wriggle room you've got.
Yeah.
Because we've proven it in several of our venues where people don't mind spending $180 or $200 on a crayfish, caviar, or a Wagyu T-bone.
Yeah.
But geez, you want to make sure you get it right.
You got to nail it.
Yeah, because the margin for error is non-existent.
So there's almost this weird sort of matrix where it crosses over, where people, like, their expectations go up. The more you spend, your expectations go up. That's just the way of the world. That's how it works.
Yep.
Whether that's right or wrong, unsure, but that's just the way that it is. Yep. That's the thing. So if someone is spending $180 on a dish, they want that to be absolutely perfect.
Yeah.
And so from a operational point of view, you have to nail that.
Yeah.
And I think, really, for me, the other thing that comes into that equation, and in the experience that I had in that restaurant, it was service.
Yeah.
Like, everything else was great. The service was great up until that point, and then obviously what happened, tails off at the end of the night. Someone goes home, sections get condensed. Someone goes from having one section to two sections to three sections.
Yeah.
It's late. There's hardly anyone doing the rounds. We're just basically topping up water and trying to get people to go home because they're fin. I get it. Like, I've been there.
Forgotten about.
And then we just sat on this, beautiful table, waiting.
Yeah.
I was like, I just want to pay.
Yeah.
And every minute that was there was like, well, that's another couple of bucks off the tip and everything else. And it was like, by the end of it, anyway, I use that experience to talk to whenever I'm talking to someone about service. It's a really important thing about that. The beginning and the end, two of the most crucial things in a restaurant is basically how you welcome someone and how you say goodbye.
We fucked it up at Piggyback when we opened. Like,
how?
In a multitude of ways. Like, that's up there with the worst restaurant openings I've ever been involved in. And we've got nobody to blame but ourselves.
Yeah.
We created a restaurant that was fantastic. We thought it was what we'd done very successfully at Rice Boy and also Giddy Geisha. But we put too many tables and chairs out. Like, I think there was 180 or 190 chairs in the first week, and still now we're just over 100 because we just couldn't handle it.
You couldn't handle, like, the kitchen couldn't handle the volume of people.
Nobody could.
Right.
Like, we just got inundated. So there was a massive queue
to get in.
The fucking car parking on the street was ridiculous.
Yeah.
Where people find it okay, thinking they'd find it okay to park there, if I showed you, you wouldn't believe me.
Yeah.
And then, so there was that component, which there's still an element of that which is still going on. But then, we didn't take in consideration how that many people would line up,
where they
people
go,
couldn't get in. Oh, it was just fucking shit. And then we couldn't handle the volume from front of house or the kitchen, so we fucked it up.
Right.
And literally after a day and a half, 2 days, we shut it. We pulled half the furniture out. We had to get on top of the mise en place so we had food in the place.
Yeah.
And then we reopened with 75 chairs and slowly but surely just started chopping away at it.
I remember that. You guys, like, you ran out of food.
Yeah.
What was it, the first Sunday or something like that? You literally, it was like, we can't open tonight because you had no food. You couldn't get food.
There's a good social media clip on that, Corey. You should play it, where Mitch and I filmed it and said, we're fucking shutting.
Insert here.
Guys, Mitch, what an amazing first weekend, hey? Yeah, who would ever have thought? Guys, we've got some sad news, but unfortunately we've completely sold out. We've got nothing left in the cold room, so we're making a very hard decision. We're closing tonight, Piggyback, from 4:30.
Oh, it was, it was. I walked in and Eliza was in tears and Mitch was broken. It was we fucked it up.
And the challenge is as well, like that welcome.
Sorry to go back on exactly what you said, but because we were the same as what we are at Rice Boy. It was cheap and cheerful.
Yeah.
But the value for money we offered was fucked.
Yeah.
Because people were having a shit time.
Yeah.
And once we reset, we knew that we could do the food and Eliza could do the front of house really easy. We just needed to take the time to train and get the systems right rather than just biting off more than what we could chew. And that's exactly what we did.
So do you reckon you opened too early?
No, we didn't open too early. We just got too greedy about how many people we wanted to feed, because the rice boy model is get them in and get them out, and everybody fucking came, and we shit the bed.
Yeah.
That's the...
And I think the thing is you can't, and I know, you know, you got a bit of a roasting for that as well. A lot of locals and stuff got up in arms, whatever it may be, and it's fair enough.
So
but,
they should.
Yeah. But that's the thing, if you can only plan for so much.
We gave a lot of food away, mate. Like, we didn't...
Right.
We didn't say, fuck you.
Yeah.
Like, you still... Like, we gave a lot of... And I'm one of these people, if we don't... We make a commitment, right? And you come in and you say, I'm committed to pay $20 for that curry.
Yeah.
We're committed to give you a curry that tastes good.
Yeah.
If you wait now for that curry, you're not going to pay for it.
No.
You know, if we give you a shit curry, you're not going to pay for it.
So
we just we carved it all back and we just started chipping away. And you know, now it's a well-oiled machine.
Yeah.
And it does. I think on Friday, Saturday night, it did like 600 covers. It's a beast of a restaurant out there. But the systems are better down now. But we still got half the tables and chairs out that we could have. But we're committed to making sure that we've got this great value for money local eatery out there.
Yeah.
And I think we've come pretty close now.
And I think it's interesting. I think a lot of people want that in terms of that local place.
Yep.
I don't have it currently where I am, but I'd love to be able to have a great restaurant within walking distance of my house.
Yeah.
Or a great pub. Don't even have that. No offense to anyone that is anywhere near me in terms of where they live, but I just don't. I can't walk to a great place and have a great glass of wine or that, regardless of the price point.
Yeah.
You know, and I think some of the things that a lot of places can sometimes miss as well is just assume that everyone wants to be at the bottom end of the market.
Yeah.
And everyone only wants to spend X, Y, Z. And we've seen this, I'm sure you and I've seen this 1,000 times about particularly wine. And it's like, I can't remember how many venues where I've said, just put something on that's a little bit more expensive and just see what happens. And God forbid, it actually sells.
Pigeonhole yourself.
Correct.
And you limit your sales.
Yeah.
Like, the amount of times that I've been asked to do some consulting, and the first thing I do is I go grab the menus and have a bit of a look. And, you know, whether it be, you know, champagne, Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, everything's under $60. And instantly I know, well, what happens if you want to come in and have...
If you want to blow it out, yeah.
You know, and I say, I understand you when you're starting a business or your business might not be going very well, a carton of French champagne is a lot. But you can go to one of the big guys.
Get a bottle.
Go to one of the little guys and get one and put it in the fridge.
I mean,
and then if it sells, get another two.
Get another two, exactly.
You know, and then slowly but surely you if you're listening carefully, the market irrefutably tells you what they want. It's just whether or not you're smart enough to listen to it, because it'll tell you when you're shit and it will tell you when you're good.
And when you say listen, it's not necessarily as in someone physically saying, hey, I really like this wine, I'm going to come and buy more. What are you listening to?
Show me your 20 best-selling dishes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's data.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that, you know, some people can really miss the boat on that.
Yep.
And it's a shame for a lot of those small places. It's like, and it's not about just putting on fancy booze or fancy food for that matter. I mean, you know, if you've got a burger shop and you got burgers, that's what you're going to do. There's kind of a price point cap on that. Mind you, these days there probably isn't. You know, what was that burger that a couple of years ago was in the States, you know, Wagyu and foie gras and truffle and gold leaf and everything. It was like $300 or $400 or something stupid like that. So maybe there isn't a cap anymore. But, you know, as I said earlier, like the thing for me is I don't have that place where I can just walk to and get that value for just a glass of wine on a Friday night or a Tuesday night or whatever. And I think that's one of the things that, you know, we kind of lack in the burbs, certainly in the Sunshine Coast. You know, there's not a lot of those kind of places. Everything's on the water, you know, or closer to the water. You know, I live a whole 10 minutes inland. You know, it's a drastic commute, but it does make a difference. And those places don't kind of exist.
Yeah.
I think they're starting to, and, you know, certainly up in Buderim, there's some great value for money places up there now.
So what would you, I mean, do you just take, if you were asked to go and help with a wine list, would you just take every sort of venue on its own merits before you start going, really should be having a look at this style of wine list? Or
100%. I mean, it's got to be
what food they're serving.
It's got to be the venue's wine list. And the other thing for me, you know, is that I'd like to think that anyone that I've ever been involved in, it's not really mine.
Yeah.
It's the venue's wine list. There's some signatures that might be on there. Maybe. Do I have relationships with certain suppliers that I use constantly? Probably. That's just business. It's easy to deal with people you like and people you know you can get things from.
And people you trust.
Then people, trust is a big one. Absolutely. But yeah, it's definitely not about me. But I think it's also a lot of venues get concerned about price point, and they, like you said, from a stock perspective, they don't want to be carrying too much stock. So it's like, don't. I always suggest to people start small and get big. Rather than get big and have to get small because you work out the market doesn't want it.
But isn't it funny? You can be the cheapest joint in town, but if you're serving shit, people still won't go.
Correct.
But it always baffles me when you get a strip of restaurants all selling the same thing, all just trying to be $1 or $2 cheaper.
Yeah.
Why don't you just completely tip the menu on its head and charge what you have to, not what you can, and be better than the guy next door?
Do you think, and obviously we're talking specifically probably more so about the Sunshine Coast than anyone else.
Well, it's market we know really
Yeah,
well.
exactly. But do you think a lot of that has to do with the tourist trade and that idea that there is the peak and trough that's going to come with being in these areas? Not as much as there used to be, and we talked about that recently, but that idea of we'll just milk them for everything we've got because they're probably not going to be here tomorrow or next week.
Look, at the end of the day, I reckon if you've got and I don't care where it is, but if you're solely focused on the tourist trade, I reckon you're fucked anyway. Unless you're in somewhere that's so super dense like Los Angeles or Hawaii, where you've got 365 days of the year of tourists.
Yeah.
But if you are any of the tourist areas that we know, in particular, we know the Sunshine Coast well, or Gold Coast, you're fucked because the troughs are too deep.
Yeah.
Like you will hurt for legitimately 7 months of the year,
and so
the peaks might get the bills paid, but you'll never make any money.
Yeah.
So I always say, don't judge me on at Christmas time. Come the third week of winter on a rainy Monday night and see how many people we got in the restaurant.
Yeah.
That'll tell you, irrefutably, that'll tell you if the business is making any money.
And
I reckon.
I agree. I also think that, and you mentioned rain. I think that's a big thing. It's been raining here. It seems like it hasn't stopped raining all year, which is really great for golf. It's not. Anyway, sorry, didn't get to play on the weekend. But I think even cafes very close by to us right now, the difference between today being a rainy day outside and last week when it wasn't a rainy day outside, there's no one there.
No.
There's no one there. People just don't do it.
No.
And I think that comes into the conversation about value as well. It's like, could I be bothered getting up, driving, getting a bus, getting an Uber, whatever it is, to a venue to get that when I can just stay home.
Yeah.
And I think that, more and more again, the conversation's like, do we want to drive?
Yeah.
Okay, if we don't want to drive, this recently went to Brisbane for an event, had to really consider the cost.
Yeah.
I stayed in probably the worst hotel I've ever stayed in my life. It was worth it, don't get me wrong, in terms of I got to go to the event that I wanted to go to. But if I put into it the cost of everything that goes into that, it's a stupid amount of money.
Yeah.
Fuel, that kind of stuff. It's like you got to consider these things these days because it's not just a tap, 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 tap. It's like it's going to stop tapping at some point in time. So,
but I think that going back to what we're saying about the great value for money, I think that's where you really secure your local trade, where the locals feel as though you're not having a crack at them.
How do you do that?
Ripping the piss. I think you just got to listen to them because, as I said before, if you're looking at the data, it won't lie to you. Where if you come into the restaurant and you have lunch, it'll be difficult for you as my friend to go, oh, you know what, that steak was a bit chewy, and for fucking $50, that's like, but the market will just stop coming.
Yeah.
Or if you're analysing data like we analyse it pretty significantly, you'll see what's dropping and what's not. Like the first thing I do when I ask a chef about a menu change is, what's your best-selling dishes? And it's funny, what a chef will actually say to compared to what the data says is usually vastly different.
Yeah.
And you should be using that to change the dishes and change the prices accordingly. Now, the prices shouldn't be something that's made up, because the first thing I always say is, I go, geez, that dish is nice. How much does that cost?
Yeah.
Because the cost is what determines how much you sell it for.
Yeah.
You don't go, what can I get for that? People love lobster, $200. It's like, well, tell me how much it costs.
Yeah.
That's why I like market price. So then it fluctuates.
adjust it,
It's a simple multiplier for us.
when I think the challenge with market price, particularly on a menu, is some people just like, I'm not even going to ask because
Yeah.
it's going to be expensive.
Yeah.
You know,
I think it's got to be said
what the
what the
market
market price is.
Yeah.
So you say the crayfishes, you know, they're about 800 grams.
Yeah.
So they're
You can do the math
$150 a
yourself.
kilo.
Yeah.
You know, so then you go, oh, half of that, blah, blah, you know.
Yeah.
So, well, we don't do it to trick anybody up. We do it so the price determines how much it costs,
Yeah.
not anything else.
Do you think so? Like, you know, with wine, for example, there's a sliding scale. So basically, the more expensive a bottle of wine is on a wine list, probably the less margin the restaurant's going to make, but the more dollars they're going to make, which is relatively straightforward. Does the same thing happen in food, or do you kind of always work on that 30% COGS?
No, we try. Well, we try and work on 28 only because there's a GST component to
Sure,
it. So
yeah.
and then there's a bit of waste. So if you aim for 28, you're usually going to get around that 30% mark anyway.
So what we're talking about there is 28% of the cost of the dish
Yep.
is the actual cost
Yep.
from a food-only perspective.
Or 72% markup.
Before we started recording, you started talking about this coffee cup.
Yep.
So you said that you would only consider, in terms of the cost of goods of that coffee, what would you consider the cost of goods of that coffee that you just had?
The milk and the coffee.
That's it.
Yeah. Because it's the only thing I consumed.
Yes, but that's a single-use cup lid,
It should be considered in what the prices you sell it for,
right?
but the cost of the goods that I've consumed is the coffee and the milk. The disposables, and it's funny because it's not really even worthwhile arguing about because it's still a line item in the P&L. So
Right,
it
so it's
comes
still
out of the
there.
bank account.
Exactly.
But if the chef is negotiating what that packaging is, great. But if you, the owner, turn around and go, it needs to be hand
Yeah.
fucking carved and whittled out of an old oak tree,
Yeah.
how can that can't affect the cost of goods? But there'll be a line item saying your fucking stupid
Your
coffee
your
cups.
consumables have
Yeah.
cost 10 times as much as anything else this
Yeah.
week.
And I know that's from a chef's perspective. Just judge me from what I can
Yeah.
control.
Yeah. Yeah,
If you
okay.
give me the packaging, no worries. But
You'll go out and find the cheapest packaging you can.
just how much do you want to sell a coffee for?
Yeah.
Because
you
I
work
always go,
backwards.
yeah. So with a menu in my head, I've got a template of what we need to, the spots we need to fill and
Yeah.
the price points. We always say we want the main courses to be between here and here.
Yeah.
So now I'm looking for a piece of fish for my menu,
That's going
and
to...
I've got $8 for the protein to play with.
You're right. So you're basically doing it both ways.
Yeah.
So you
But
either find the fish and then go, well, therefore it needs to be this much, or you go, I've got a gap in the menu, so I need to find fish at that price.
Yeah, I've got a fish gap
Yeah.
in the menu. What type of fish do I want?
Yeah.
And then we go, do we want
Snapper.
Yeah.
Snapper. Only snapper.
Or
Or barra.
Or salmon. But
It's one of those three fish.
Find the fish. So you got the gap, and then you go hunting for that. What does the market want? So
Yeah.
at Market Bistro, I'm always into Justin there about let's get something. We're better than salmon, barra, snapper, right? We just are. So monkfish, John Dory.
Yeah.
You know, find something
Tuna.
different, local flathead.
Yeah.
Beautiful tuna, swordfish. You know, but then you need to work out the price. Then you need to work out the size, the portion size, because all that the price point should be determined.
Yeah.
You got a $42 gap in the menu that you need a piece of fish for.
Yeah.
So in my head, I'm like, just save a few dollars for garnish. Work backwards. 28% cost of goods. I know that it's probably $8 that
Yeah.
I need to get a piece of fish for.
Yeah.
And so then I go shopping.
And so that's the thing. That's a finished piece of fish, completely cut, dressed, ready to rock and roll, with everything out of it, bones out, the works, just
Yep.
boom, ready to go.
So then you know, if you're real desperate, the reason why barra is so predominant is one, there's farm barra everywhere.
Yeah.
And it yields really well. There's fuck all waste. Generally, a lot of people like it.
Yeah. Particularly in
But-
Queensland.
Yeah, but it's like what I said before, you know, like it seems to be a bit of a race to the bottom because if every single menu you go to on the Sunshine Coast has barra, salmon or snapper on there, it's
Yeah.
like, fuck, can you get any more boring than that? Why aren't I selling much fish? Well, you go into Market Bistro and there's monkfish or there's squire or there's coral trout or last week I went in there with some really good friends of mine, there was red emperor. There's no wondering why we sold every portion like
Yeah,
that.
'cause it's not
people
the-
are like, fucking red emperor.
Yeah.
And it was $58.
For
It's
the
not
fish.
cheap.
That was a whole fish?
No, but that's how much it costs. Like red emperor is a fucking expensive fish, but Jesus Christ, it's delicious.
Yeah.
And you got a beautiful, healthy serve of it.
Yeah.
But that's what we needed to sell it for.
And so,
We didn't pluck that number out of our heads.
yeah, right. It was worked it back. This is what it costs. Therefore, it needs to be this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I suppose, where the market, like you said, you listen to the market, it'll tell you. If you go, we sold no fish tonight. So now we're fucked.
Yeah.
We've got 20 kilos of fucking red emperor that we've got to do something with.
Yeah.
And we don't really want to turn this into stock or gravlax or whatever.
Yeah.
Not gravlax, something else, because it's fucking premium fish.
The problem is when you're going north of that $40 mark, your margin for error is fucking non-existent.
But you get there real quick these
yeah,
days.
of course you do.
Like roughly fish per kilo, white flesh
North of
fish,
$50
a kilo.
Yeah.
As a whole fish or as a fillet?
as a fillet.
As a fillet. Okay, so you're paying for the fact that it's been filleted already. It comes to you pretty much ready to go. You just got to cut it up. Bullshit.
You got to take the bones out of it, or take the skin off it if you don't want the skin on it. So there's still work to do to it. It won't yield 100%.
I was going to say, so you're not yielding that at all.
So it's probably $70.
Yeah.
So, but if your market will tell you. Like if I went and opened a restaurant in Alice Springs or Nambour, am I putting Southern Rock Lobster for $180 on the menu? No, I'm not going to do it. Only because I know the market's. I will assume the market's not there. I may test it.
Yeah.
But I'll test it with something a bit cheaper than that, and then I'll just start creeping up. There's a reason why we're fortunate enough now with Market Bistro. We've got things like caviar on the menu because we just know that there's a market there.
All the time?
Yeah, because people are coming back there constantly looking for that premium experience.
Yeah. And I think, certainly the last few years, and I think from a trend perspective, that end of the market is not going anywhere, and it's certainly been trending up.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. If you're doing caviar, how much is it?
$75
per serve per person. Okay, so looking at $150 caviar service for 2 people, right?
Yep.
That has to be good. That has to have all of the accoutrement that you want. It has to have, that you're doing blaney.
It's got to be served well. Yeah,
so it's like it's got to have that full thing.
If there's one single bit of it that falls over, we're fucked.
Yeah, and again, there's nowhere to hide with caviar. It's it is what it is.
It's
so if you start using something
top end wine, mate,
Yeah.
if you don't have the glass that matches, if you don't have the service of somebody that can tell you a little bit about that wine, and it's not cold enough, or it's not hot enough, or it's.
And there's all those little things like has it been stored correctly?
Yeah.
Has it been in a Vintec or a fridge of some kind? Has it, like you said, the glassware I think is a massive thing, huge thing.
I think all that is value for money.
Yeah, it all comes into it.
All of it, every single bit of it.
I remember going to a restaurant. I was working in Washington DC a couple of 1,000 years ago, just for a couple of weeks, and we went to a restaurant that was like the place at the time in DC. And walked in. I had no idea what this place was at all. I was just told we're going there. So we turn up and we sit down, white linen. There was 4 sets of cutlery on the table. There was a Riedel water glass and 4 Riedel Sommelier Series stems on the table. So I'm going, right, well, that's $500 worth of glassware cost on the table before we get started. I might need to get the credit card ramped up for this. And it was one of those things where it was like, this is ridiculous. The great thing was, working in hospitality, you get spotted pretty quickly in terms of someone will be able to spot someone in hospitality, someone good in the service industry, in hospitality, will be able to spot another hospitality worker in about 3 minutes, because it's the way that they order. And back then it was generally you sit down, you order a glass of champagne and a dozen oysters before anything else happens. And it's like, we'll just get started with that. And they go, oh, hang on, are you in the industry? And it's like, yes. And it's like, well, here we go. And then you end up doing, we had a great night, don't get me wrong. It was great value at any cost because we got looked after and everything else. But it was intimidating when you sit down at a table straight away and you go, oh, this is going to get expensive. I almost feel like a kid.
Yeah.
When you go into a jewelry shop when you're a kid and your parents are like, put your arms behind your back. It's like, don't fucking break anything.
Yeah.
And I remember that I had that conversation both from my parents and then also to my son, the same thing. It's like, put your hands behind your back. But when you sit down at a restaurant, you don't really want to be putting your hands behind your back. You don't want people coming in nervous straight away. But in those kind of venues, it's very easy to get nervous because when people, like, they generally know when they go in, you're not going to book one of the best restaurants in the country and not expect to pay a couple of bucks. But it was still daunting.
Yeah.
And that was for someone who was a professional in the industry.
Yeah.
But for others, that can happen at any level.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure that happens at market even, where
Yeah.
people sort of come in and go, well, this is a bit fancy, but, that was never the intention there.
No.
And I think that...
For some people, there'll be some people out there, irrefutably, who'll just think that that's incredibly expensive.
Yeah, of course.
Which, it's not cheap, but for me, it represents great value for money.
And I think that's the thing, like, the difference between cheap and expensive, and I hate using the word cheap in any sentence. And when it comes to wine, it's a big thing. It's like, it's not cheap. Cheap has this kind of makes it feel a little bit dirty. It's like, it's not cheap. It's just not expensive.
So we use Kilcoy meat, right? And it's such a great product. Hardly any of it hits the Australian market. It's their export quality gear. So we put so much energy and effort in finding our suppliers are our everything.
Yeah.
But we serve all of our steak with some pickled cabbage, French fries, and a delicious sauce. That's it. But we got to make sure that our plates are warm, plates are polished. We serve good cutlery. If you order a steak, you're getting a beautiful steak knife that's been sharpened. So all of those little things, they make that value for money.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing fancy with the steak. It's just really fucking good meat. And it's served well, with restraint, with good tools.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it well. I don't think we could sell an eye fillet for $60 and serve a packet sauce with it, or a hollandaise or a béarnaise out of a Tetra Pak. We need to put the energy and effort into doing that so we can get the $60, because people are acutely aware of what they can buy elsewhere. Like, if you go to any of the surf clubs up and down the coast, you can get a solid steak, and you're probably paying $40 to $50. I haven't been for a while.
Easy.
You still got to get up and get it yourself.
Yeah.
You got to go and order at the counter. You've got either a QR code at the table, and maybe you might get it delivered to the table, but I'm suggesting 90% of the time a buzz will go off and you've got to go pick it up yourself.
Yeah.
So for $60, I know that I'm going to get better meat than you just through our relationship with our suppliers. And then also the way we serve it, it's just better.
Yeah. And I think probably the number one thing when it comes to steak, again, is the temperature.
Yeah.
If I ask for a medium rare steak, and everyone's very specific about their steaks, right? Like, I used to have an old customer who's like, he wanted the hockey puck.
Yeah.
I was like, I want my eye fillet to literally look like a hockey puck. So we can make that happen for you, because you're the one that's eating it. But again, straight away, if I don't see, again, when there's nowhere to hide, if that steak's not right, well, then what do you do? That experience straight away is gone.
Mate, all the effort that we go to in finding the wood for the barbecue, you've got to light the fire at a particular time of the day, get the coals right. Like, there's a shitload that goes into it, but it's all aimed at making sure that piece of meat's just cooked really, really well.
Yeah.
And then if you know that Market Bistro, for example, is your steak joint, we just got to have consistency. That's why we never aim to be unbelievably epic. We just aim to be good 7 days a week. Philip Johnson taught me that years ago. He goes, if you never aim to be unbelievably awesome, if you just aim to be good, but you just got to be good every day.
And consistently good across the board. So food, service, wine, everything.
Yeah. I feel you thinking.
Yeah, I am thinking. The reason why I'm thinking is it's like, we talk about this value for money, and you've said it's the number one thing for the businesses. How hard is it to walk the walk of that's the thing that you do when there's all these other things that have to come into it, like profitability, staff, finding the right staff, making sure that the rest of the business is running in the right possible way. But if your number one thing is value for money, how hard is it to keep in that sustainability, like all these things that are in the
If you think for 1 second, and I'm talking 1 second, that the restaurant industry or the restaurant game is anything other than simple mathematics, you're high. It's simple mathematics. It's if every decision that you make in and around the business is just not done from a place of commerce, you're dead in the water. You might fluke it. I'm sure there's been a bunch of people out there that do, but it's simple maths. You've got to take everything into account. Like as soon as we go and look at a site, before I start getting excited about a site, I've got a very, very good spreadsheet. It's like a mock P&L, and all I've got to do, we think about the concept that we want to do. We get an average check, then what we think the average check's going to be in the venue based on the menu, the wine list, and the food.
Yep.
And then we just plug in the numbers, what we think the turnover can be based on the size of the venue, what the rent would be based on the size of the venue. And then I've got keyed into this P&L a multiplier for things like gas and electricity and
Yep.
water. And then at the end, it will show me if the numbers are red or
Yeah.
the numbers are black.
Yeah.
Now, I won't let my emotions guide that, because if the numbers are mostly red, I'm out.
Yeah.
I'm instantly out. Or if it shows me that I can only get 50 seats in there, so I need to do 300 covers a day, Monday through to Sunday, I'm fucking out.
Yeah.
But if like Boca, for example, we ran the numbers so many times in that because there's a few elements in there that weren't making any sense to us. I was like, that can't be right. So we go again,
like what?
In a good way. Just based on the floor space, outside seating, the P&L was spitting out numbers that just looked a bit too good to be true. But
Right.
one of the big things about Italian food is it's really fast. Like Harry and Tatiana and Luke, oh my God, they spit out so much food over there,
Yeah.
and lots of takeaway as well, which was an element that I knew that we undercooked. Just from in my calculations, we sell a lot of takeaway pizza.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's great numbers because there's no front of house labour involved
Yeah.
in that, especially now where we run the ordering online through our website.
Yeah.
So literally, the only transaction that needs to be made is giving the box to the customer.
Yeah.
So that element has been really good for us. So that was all really exciting on a positive way. But yeah, it's simple mathematics, Pete, for us. And to try and do that unemotionally, because it's amazing. You would have done it as well, and I'm so guilty of it. Square peg, round hole. I can make it work because I fucking love this size.
Yeah. Yeah. Never
know,
going to work.
no.
What's really interesting is, so going through some of the topics for today, and I've, undervalue for money, and I've got 3 questions in there. It's like working out what's next, what goes into the decision of opening a new venue, and is it purely math? So I think you've answered that. Yeah, so it is.
I think it's number
Or
one.
it should be.
Really. It really
Should be. And I think that's one of those things where, I mean, I remember, again, going back years and years and years, it's like, how many muffins can we sell that day?
Yeah.
What's like before going into a business, like, can we sell 100 muffins a day? Probably not. Okay, well then what is the number that we think realistically that we can sell? It's this.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's the same spreadsheet as you're talking about. It's like, well, okay, well then if we do this and this and this, that's not going to work.
Yeah.
So is that then the wrong venue or is it the wrong menu?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, let's work it out. And
I always look at the simple one for me. It's funny in the restaurant game because I go, are we going to sell champagne? And are we going to sell champagne by the glass? So I know instantly when I say that, your head goes by the glass between $17 and $25, by the bottle between $90 and $125. That's what the market says. But then I go, oh, well, I want to sell Dom Ruinart. And instantly you go, well, that's a $50 a glass champagne. Like, it's square peg, round hole.
yeah,
And if you might, there's nothing stopping you from selling really, really good top end wine cheap, but you just got to be willing to get towelled up.
Yeah.
That's all, because it'll get to the stage where the maths is not great enough for you to open that expensive bottle of wine, get it in a glass, serve it, polish the glass, get it reset on the table for it to make any sense.
and
You
then
just wanna
waste
make
the
any
other 3 glasses that are in the bottle. So
Correct,
because no one
because-
buys it that often. So
money. $50 a glass.
and again, that's that reporting thing, right? Are we selling this? No, stop doing it.
Yeah.
The amount of times where you look at a venue and you're like, this is insanity, like
Yeah.
actual insanity. You keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result,
Yeah.
and it's just not happening. So something needs to change. But a lot of people don't want to hear that as well. You said about removing the emotions. That is one of the most difficult things to do, particularly when it's your business, right? And when people often go into business where they've worked for other people and they're like, no, I'm going to do it my way. It's going to be different. We're going to do this, 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 and this, and then they're done within a year.
We opened salt water. I wanted to do $10 fish and chips. I wanted to do great fish and chips, fresh fish from the slipway, and
yeah.
I wasn't fucking good enough.
Why? What do you mean?
Because we could not do it. I could not buy the quality of product that's
You needed to.
representative of our brand and sell it for what we needed to in a takeaway fish and chip offer, and and be in the market.
Yeah.
The market told me irrefutably that they really don't care about the fish. You needed to be in between that $8 to $12 for the fish market. You need to be around that $5 for a good handful of chips.
Yep.
And we couldn't sell a quality product that we wanted to
Yep.
for that price. So we had to ripcord it and get it out.
Yeah.
So we towelled up 30 or 40 grand
How long did that take?
to towel up that much money.
No, yeah,
Or
for you to
recognise
realise it.
6 months.
Yeah.
Which we tried really, really hard,
Yeah.
and we were prepared to lose some money along the way to get the product right. But it was about the 5-month mark where I'm like, this is legitimately square peg round hole. For us to achieve what we need to achieve, we've got to serve an inferior quality product. Now, I'm not irrefutably the market's out there for that,
Yeah.
and probably my kids are one of those. If I'm not willing to cook it at home, we'll go to one of these takeaway markets,
Yeah.
and they do it really well.
Yeah.
But it's just not part of our business. So.
Yeah.
And then we realised that really low margin product is not. It's more of a mum and dad business where you're working in there.
You're getting a salary. You're paying. You basically buy yourself a job in that business.
Because
Yeah.
under management, there's not enough margin in it.
And that's a conversation that I have with people all the time. It's like, well, who's going to run it? It's like, I'll get someone in. It's like, well, there's your profit.
I get emotional about it because a lot of people go, oh, you got the Midas touch. You never have a fail. It's like you're blind.
Yeah.
Like I have been flogged.
Yeah.
You know, and the market irrefutably told me very quickly that I wasn't good enough for that.
Yeah.
I could have sat back there and blamed the car parking, blamed the rent, blamed all this shit instead of just looking at me and going, what I was doing wasn't good enough.
But that's a hard pill to swallow, particularly when you're in business and it's your money and you sit there and you're like, I fucked that up.
Yeah.
How important? I mean, I suppose again we come back to this reporting thing because you've got to look at those numbers like you do every single week. Recently, I had someone say, "Oh, how often do we need to do a stock take? Is it every quarter?" And I was like, "No, what? Why? What are you talking about? Why would you do that if you don't know what you've got? How can you possibly be getting accurate reports on anything?" It's like, yeah, I get that it takes a lot of effort and time and everything else, but if you don't know how much stock you've got every month at a minimum. It's like, what are you doing?
Mate, I was speaking to a very predominant restaurant person 2 weeks ago who they've had their business for 5 years, never had it stock taked. And I was just so shocked. It actually, I have a physical reaction to that.
I just got
sweating.
like pure anxiety in the middle of my chest just then.
Because I don't know how you spend money when you don't know how much you
You
got.
don't know how much you've got.
Yeah.
And again, I then question the accounting that's going on behind that. It's like, well, you need to know what's happening there. Someone needs to be telling these people what they should be doing. But anyway,
That's why I guess that's why there's the hospitality industry is like filled with landmines, mate. Like there's bodies everywhere.
Yeah.
Because it's people think that it's just easy, and it's like this fallback thing where, unfortunately, there's so much money going in, so much money going out, that you've got to make sure that you're accounting for every single dollar, or else you will be fucked.
and what I think a lot of people don't understand is how low the margins are. So we're talking about this value for money. Like there's certain price points. In general, we know the industry average is sub double-digit return.
Oh, God, yeah.
Like well and truly sub double-digit return. So, if if you're looking for a business for 5 to 10 years, in some circumstances, you're better off just putting that in the bank because you're going to get a return.
Yeah. My dad used to say that to me all the
Which
time.
is scary as hell. It's like you're actually better off just not doing anything. If you've got that chunk of money,
Yep.
you're almost better off just putting it into some kind of long-term yielding yada, yada, yada. It's like, what are we talking about?
If you wanted to get into the restaurant game for romance, that's the number one thing that I say is don't do it.
How many people do you reckon, percentage-wise, obviously this is anecdotal, get into it for without really knowing what they're doing?
Oh, God. It has to be in the 90s.
Really?
Yeah, of course. Mate, how many times do you reckon you've been asked, I want to retire into restaurants? Never owned a restaurant themselves. They might be cashing out and they've got a few bucks from something else.
Yeah.
And they think that it's romantic.
And look, it does work every now and then, but it's really the every now and then, isn't it? So, and
Mate, I don't know. I'd have to really think about
yeah,
who.
now I'm thinking about it as well.
Because I don't know somebody who does that. Like it's especially in the I say the top end market, but the bottom end market's probably fucking harder.
I'd say it is because your turnover is going to be lower unless
need
you're
to be
doing
working in there every
5,000
day.
people. Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, I saw a business recently where it was very obvious that the owners were working in it, but they clearly don't normally work in it because it ended up just being a nightmare because they were just fucking everything up.
Yeah.
Probably, think they're helping, obviously, as well, going in with the right intentions, but
Yeah.
it's just like, just get out and let the staff do their jobs.
Yeah.
which is, hard as well when it's your money and you're like,
And it's really hard. Like you just need to answer that question properly. It's like, what are you getting into it for?
Yeah.
Like if you're chasing passive income, there's so many other things I do with my money than going to a restaurant. But
Yeah.
if you want to invest in it and you want to get yourself a job, like it's you really do have to treat it like a job and get in there, get your hands dirty, and live and breathe it
Yeah.
for at least a couple of years, because you won't even know within that time period if you've got a job or a business. Now, I always say, unless you can walk away from that,
you got a job.
it's just a job.
Yeah.
Until you can go, well, I'm taking off for a week,
Yeah.
and you don't really have to be too concerned about
You
it.
have to think about it. Yeah.
Then you've just got a job.
That's rare though.
Yeah, it is.
In hospitality in particular, I think with most businesses, I think that is very rare. And a lot of owners in particular don't want to take time off because they don't want to leave their baby. Most of them are control freaks in some way, shape or form. Not that that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
But there is a point where you have to give that up.
Yep.
And it's a really hard skill to learn.
It is, and you just got to be a good recruiter.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah.
Because you've got that's why the model that we've focused in on, where we've got in the kitchen and the front of house, our managers have got skin in the game.
Yeah.
It changes everything.
Yeah.
Like, every single element of how they act, it changes when they've got skin in the game.
100%. Yeah. And that's the thing. It's all you're working for someone as opposed to working for yourself. You would think the mindset is different.
Yeah.
Probably should be. In terms of, if you had to sort of encapsulate value for money, this is not going to be an easy question either.
Yeah.
If you had to encapsulate value for money, not for you, but for a general statement about what value for money is, what is it?
I can't help but say the number one thing that I always say about value for money is sell it for what you have to, not what you can.
Okay.
Because I think that's the driver.
Yeah.
Like it's a simple mathematical equation for
Yeah.
me. You need to figure out what it costs, and then we add a 72% margin to that, which covers GST. It covers a bit of waste. It covers our staff tasting it. And our general rule of thumb is we'll work on a 30% cost of goods. So we get it right most of the time. But that's our number one key.
Yeah.
And that's our motto that we use. But I would say it 10 times a day,
Yeah.
every single day.
Live and die by that.
Yeah. But that it's hard because unless it's every venue's should have its own set of guidelines there. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
if you work on the whole sell it for what you have to, not what you can, that philosophy, then you'll get it right most of the time, I think. Because the number one driver needs to be that, I think.
I think for me, it's almost these intangibles that,
Yep.
I mean, the math is obviously critical,
Yep.
but there's these intangible things that can affect someone's experience that have such a massive amount to do with value. And I think service is the biggest driver of that.
I totally agree.
We've talked about the fact you can have a good restaurant with good food, good booze, good service, and people will be happy. You have a restaurant with good food, good booze, and great service, then you're set.
Yeah, I agree.
I think that has such a massive thing. So if all those sort of elements come together, and it is alchemy to get it right, and it's hard to get it right for every single customer on every single day in every single service. And one of the reasons why I will never do breakfast ever again, because it's one of the hardest places to make money.
I just don't know how you do it.
I still don't understand. But that said, I mean, I had breakfast in Brisbane last weekend and was quite surprised. I mean, the value for money was there, but I stopped myself from ordering something because it's like I can't pay that. That doesn't make sense. Why would I pay $14 for whatever that was, a side dish? Like for $14, it's like, what are we talking about?
Yeah.
I mean, I know I'm old, but I mean, Christ, entrees used to be $14. So it's just like,
It's like that.
oh, it's
That's
scary.
what I mean. Why does it need to be $14? What was it?
Something you don't need to charge $14 for. So regardless of what kind of salt is on those chips.
Well, let's go out on a high, but I'd love to finish up each week talking about what's the over the weekend. What was the best thing you ate, and what's the best thing you drank? Was there a highlight or a low light?
I'm just trying
Corey?
to think. Well, we know Corey's low light, even though he thinks it's a highlight. That's the interesting thing. But that's value for money. Everyone's different, and that is critical. And highlight, geez, in terms of food. And honestly, yesterday went to the Fisherman's Road markets. Little pide, just freshly made pide. Little these couple. They're most of the markets around the Sunshine Coast, but I have a problem with pizza. There's just no ands or buts about it. And this is basically Turkish pizza, and it was just there's just something delicious about getting something freshly made in front of you. You're sitting there, you're waiting for it to cook. They call your name out, and you go up and you get this thing. And I couldn't get it into my face quick enough, to the point where I do have a slight burn on the roof of my mouth from the pepperoni that was on that pide yesterday. And I just love that it was right there. It was simple. There was nothing to it. I mean, we're talking about flour, water, and a couple of other things, and it's sort of done. And I love that. I appreciate that. In terms of drinks, I didn't drink much on the weekend, which is probably hard to fathom for most people. But yeah, well, that was very kind of you. I know you're going to trump me with this one, well and truly, based on the weekend you had. But I'll ask you the same question. What's the best thing you ate or drank over the last 7 days?
Mate, I was very fortunate to be in Melbourne over the weekend, and I ate at Gimlet restaurant, and I had a O'Connor's dry aged T-bone, which we were sharing amongst friends at the table. And oh my god,
ridiculous!
It was so good.
Sauce,
lemon juice, olive oil, and just the pan juices. It was served in a little copper sort of. Oh, it was just the business,
like Fiorentina sort of style.
Yeah, it was so good, all carved off the bone. That was fantastic, and some of the booze. We had a Bindi original Pinot. Remember that one we had at SK Steak and Oyster? Yes. That's the reason why I ordered it.
Yes.
And it was such a highlight.
It's a go-to. Those kind of wines. Michael Dillon's a rock star. Shout out, Michael. Hello. Those wines are incredible. But
I mean, it's the food there was just sensational.
Yeah.
Like if you're ever in Melbourne, you got to go there. I know it's a bit of a hot ticket item, and it's hard to get in there at the moment. But there's no doubt. You can't sit in that restaurant and wonder why they're busy. It's so fucking good.
Corey might have to edit in the website there.
Yeah. Yeah. Book in advance, but very well worthwhile.
Yeah, nice.
It's a cracker.
I think. I mean, that's what I love about that is possibly both ends of the spectrum in terms of food and booze, but the amount of joy was probably similar in both occasions. So simple things.
Closely followed by, I had a birthday on the weekend, 21 actually.
Correct. Congratulations. 20. How many repeats of the 21st is it? So
exactly.
It's the third anniversary of my 21st birthday.
And my son made a Basque cheesecake. And
nice.
Mate, it was fucking good.
Right.
I'm trying so hard to beat the hospitality out of him, and it's just not working.
Oh, mate, if he's making cake for you.
Mate, he's a proper, like the level of pastry commitment that he has is terrifying.
And yeah, see, I can't cook pastry.
No,
I can cook, I can't bake.
I can, but I don't enjoy it. But he does a good job. It's very surprising.
That's fantastic.
He pulled out the Philippa Sibley dessert book the other day and made the Sauterne creme caramel.
Oh yeah.
And there's no wondering why I'm a fat bastard. But
never trust
good,
a skinny
mate.
chef, isn't that the term?
Or a skinny king.
Skinny king. There we go. All right.
So
thanks, mate.
That was the highlight, mate. That was my weekend.
That's a win. That's a win indeed. All right. We'll catch up next week.
Next time.
Cheers.